Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to another Gin and Tonic show. If you'd like to join, today's topic is going to be the early Muslim conquest, the spread of Islam out of the Arabian Peninsula, and also the consolidation of the peninsula under Muhammad and the companions and the Rashidun caliphs. I'm your host, Almighty Atheismo. I'm joined by Ali of Arab Atheist Broadcasting. Thank you for joining us, and Stopspamming1. So, if you'd like to join the show at any time, just send a Skype contact request to The Gin and Tonic Show. Please don't call in the show. We will call you when we're ready. When you send us the contact request, make sure to include how you'd like to be introduced and what it is you'd like to discuss. Your question or comment does not have to be about what we're talking about today, but if it is, that's fine too. Also, when you come onto the show, make sure to mute and minimize your blog TV. Otherwise, you will see and hear yourself on a delay, and that will disorient you, which will make it difficult to discuss things with you and will disrupt the flow of the show. All guests are advised that this is recorded for upload on YouTube and streamed live on blog TV. Okay, so just a little disclaimer and explanation here. Originally, we had, my idea was that 5 of us were going to split up the different major generals and major regions of the early conquest of the Arab Muslim Empire. One of us was going to take the consolidation of the peninsula and focus on Muhammad and and his wars in the Hijaz. One of us was going to take Ibn al-As and focus on the conquest of Egypt. Someone else was going to take Khalid ibn al-Walid. Someone else was going to take this general, that general, and then focus on Syria and Persia and so forth. But obviously there aren't 5 of us here, so we're going to have to rework that formula significantly. We're going to start off with Stopspamming, who's going to give us a brief overview of the overall conquests, what their significance was, and also he drew from the hat, he drew Muawiyah as his general, and originally our plan was that we were going to do them all in first-person accounts, like one of those, Ken Burns' Civil War, but again, I wanted to scrap that I wanted to scrap that formula at some point. I didn't get the message out to everyone as they were working on their individual projects because I decided it sounded a little corny. And originally, because I drew Muhammad from the hat, I was actually going to dress up, but I couldn't really find a costume shop near where I lived that would have sold me and also I thought people would just think I was purely taking the piss if I came up here with the giant beard and the white robe and so forth. So anyway, go ahead, Stopspamming. Get us started.
Stop apologizing. Okay, guys. What we said is we're going to start right from the beginning, from when Islam started. I am going to talk about the early time after the conquest of Mecca by the Muslims. Then Muawiyah's family converted to Islam, and if I am Muawiyah, then I am the brother-in-law to Muhammad, because the sister Ramla bint Abi Sufyan was married in the first year of the Islam calendar. And then I, Muawiyah, became a scribe for Muhammad during the first and second caliphates of Abu Bakr and Umar, and also fought with the Muslims against the Byzantines in Syria. Now, the Syria is going to be quite important. When Uthman, the cousin of Muawiyah, became the 3rd caliph, he appointed Muawiyah governor of Syria. However, Ali was appointed the 4th and final Rashidun caliph, and then he expelled Muawiyah from the governorship. So there was a little bit of a squabble between the two factions, between the Sunnis and Shias. So Muawiyah refused to obey Ali and had a lot of support from within the Syrian population. So he was quite a popular governor. And then in this rebellious attitude then led to Ali calling for military action against Muawiyah. But then what happened is that the people realized that Muslims were killing Muslims. And then Muawiyah was quite upset about this and decided that he was not in for it. Now, what happened at the same time was that the political classes in Medina, they were backbiting, bitching, and fighting each other, and this was close to a civil war. And then Ali, at some stage, then he just backed off and he says, "Well, let's leave it." Although he did march on Damascus for a while in 657 CE, but nothing really happened. I think they were spitting at each other or something, but there's no real account of whether anybody was fighting or whatnot. So this is the historical background. So we're talking very early during the introduction of Islam. We're talking when Muhammad was still alive. We're talking around the turn of the century, because we don't have any contemporary records. Okay, this is always something I need to stress. Nobody really knows what happened at that time. So we're only going by what is available, and a lot of that is interpolated. So Muawiyah was somebody who was born round about the year 600, lived 80 years, ended up as the first caliph of the Umayyad dynasty. And let's see a couple of details from his life. So if I take on the role of Muawiyah now, and atheists said, tell them that you haven't gone crazy. Okay, I'm not crazy. This is just me taking this role on. I was born around approximately the year 600, lived on the Arabian Peninsula in Mecca. And what was going on around me when I was growing up is that Islam started coming into our lives, where my parents did not like Muhammad and his doctrines at all. And this was for historical reasons, much like a family feud. And for some reason, my older sister, Ramla, liked Muhammad so much that she became one of his multiple wives, making Muhammad my brother-in-law. I actually got a good education and could soon read and write. And we lived ignoring Islam until Muhammad and his hordes came back and declared Mecca defeated. So we had no choice, and the family converted to Islam. And then shortly after this, I learned that Muhammad needed scribes, so I started working for him. And it was here that I was being drawn into Islam. And after Muhammad in 632 died through poisoning, I took on more responsibilities and functions under Abu Bakr and then later Umar. But in politics, not in religion. And in all this time, I became more and more involved, and not so much the religion, but the power and influence side. And apart from learning sentences from the Quran and writing these down, I also trained handling different weapons. So when my cousin Uthman took over the caliphate, he had sufficient confidence in my abilities that he sent me to Syria. So I worked there as a governor and established the center of power and influence in Damascus, which will later be known as the hereditary dynasty of the Umayyads, named after my great-grandfather. After a few years, people admired my leadership, and by 647 we were able to defend Damascus against a Byzantine attack. And these were rough and tough times. Everybody was fighting everyone else. Disputes were settled by violence and not debates. And when in 656 Uthman was killed, the companions decided it was up to Ali, Muhammad's son-in-law, and who married the favorite daughter of Muhammad, Fatima, to take over control of the Caliphate of Islam. But I did not like Ali, the last of the four Rashidun or righteous caliphs, who they were appointed by a declaration. And Ali was one of the first ones to believe anything Muhammad said and took on different roles for him, attacking, plundering merchant caravans, raiding small settlements, and as a messenger in various battles. He thought he could ensure allegiance by replacing people who were not his buddies and just replacing them with his circle of trustees. He tried the same with me, telling me to step down, but I gave him the finger and stayed on in Damascus, where even the ordinary people were on my side. So Ali thought he could play tough with me and send some fighters, but they didn't achieve anything. What we did achieve over this was to kill some Muslims on both sides, nothing else. And I despised his weakness of not punishing the killers of my cousin Uthman, whom I considered to be a clan member of the Umayyads, and contacted some of my buddies to try and oust Ali. We saw Ali as an intruder and my cousin Uthman as a rightful heir, so I sent some of my men to defeat Ali and his followers and settle this once and for all. But Ali was now fighting different groups and even managed to take over in Basra. So I tried to stop this war, which was costing the lives of so many Muslims, but Ali refused any offers of a diplomatic resolution. I think I always offered a diplomatic resolution before resorting to fighting. So this was quite a tough time. These skirmishes were finally brought to a halt when Ali was killed in Kufa in a mosque in 661. And then, unlike Muhammad, Ali had declared a successor, his son Hassan. So all this backbiting and pitching in Medina showed me that I was on the right track in keeping away from the everyday discussions about who was what in what position in Medina and due to what revelation, and who would have access to Muhammad's incredible wealth, gathered over 23 years in the name of the Islamic God. So while Ali and Uthman had been fighting over which Quran version was better, I expanded my area of influence and used the Islamic guidance as a convincing argument in my favor, and steadily expanded in my region, south and west, and I captured Cyprus, Rhodes, and large areas of Anatolia. Once Ali was out of the way, his weak-minded son took over and won the allegiance of the region of Kufa. This idiot was still opposed to my greater plans and wanted further agriculture like his father, instead of the Islamic influence. So I wisely ignored any assurances or pacts or treaties associated with this, and paid his generals some money and promised them some fake positions until his entire army structure collapsed and turned against him. He went to Medina with his tail between his legs. And just to make sure he would never ever interfere with my plans again, I made sure one of his trusted entourage poisoned him, and he died. And he was never really a caliph. So I had won. And even when I had been occupied with Ali and then Hassan, I had an uprising and widespread rebellion in Egypt suppressed by sending my guy there to replace Aisha's brother Muhammad ibn Bakr, who was unable to handle the situation. My guy did a much better job. And this was efficient and result-oriented leadership. I think I was now sufficiently able and empowered, so I declared myself a caliph in 661. I had myself crowned caliph in Jerusalem and turned to expanding Islam in all directions. Now life was a total rush. Looking at all the different religions around me, I decided to tolerate the different belief systems in my empire, which now spanned from Persia to Egypt. I introduced administrative authorities, the divans. These divans will be in use 1.5 millennia later, and I initiated several public services. This attitude of demonstrating military force and power, along with the tolerance of people and their different views, was a strong combination and a powerful negotiating point when dealing with allies or enemies. But I always knew that my Arab brothers were the better people. So am I to blame if they were more efficient and better qualified to take the key positions? They brought the desired stability and continuous rate of expansion that I had envisaged all along. Once I had achieved all of this, I started enjoying life, and it showed. With my political goals firmly established in the right hands, I will leave it for future generations to judge whether I acted selflessly in line with what the God of the Muslims decreed, or for personal satisfaction and ignoring religious ambitions. I will let a God be my judge. And this is in 680, and I died a couple of days later.
I read a quote somewhere, I don't recall from who. It said, "The history books will be kind to me because I intend to write them." I think that could be Muawiyah's epitaph.
That's him. And apparently he was incredibly large.
Yeah, the thing is, I usually think of Muawiyah as sort of the shogun of Islam, and that he's wrested control away from what a lot of people saw was were the divinely guided and rightful rulers. And it seems like even in the Sunnah tradition, he's not necessarily very celebrated. It's just like they're the best guy that he got. And obviously the Shia will always, portray him with horns on his head for, you look at the festival with the head cutting in Basra, where they commemorate the martyrdom of Hussein. He's a pretty controversial character, but here's what I wonder is, even though his reign is typically framed as the death knell of the Orthodox Caliphate, do you think that his reforms and his sort of pragmatism over idealism really really saved that empire from being a completely transient one. In other words, I think that had the orthodox mentality been present, had someone of the same mentality of Umar, a purist, been in charge during those early years, I wonder if the Arab Empire wouldn't have sort of faded into the background the same way the Mongolians did with their conquest, where they just got absorbed by the native people or pushed out because they were just too inflexible. What do you guys think?
No, I think this strategy proved as very successful, because come on, I mean, you only have different possibilities, or so many possibilities. You can go and you kill everybody, and then I mean, look at what Hitler did in Germany. He went on all fronts, and this is what killed him, because you can't run a war against the whole world on all fronts. So by absorbing some people and then putting them in charge of their own fortunes in their own areas, but still working for you, I think this is what cemented the success of the Umayyad Empire.
Advised Hitler to choose his battles, ensuring his victory in World War II.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that about you. I mean, yes, you only know someone so well when you meet him over the internet, but still. What about you, Ali? Do you have any input on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to agree with you. Muawiyah was much more interested in politics, and I think that he actually did a pretty good job of usurping a lot of the religious doctrines and rules to get around to do pretty much what he needed to do to consolidate his own power and expand the empire. So I think I'd have to agree with that look of it. That's the way at least I see Muawiyah, as more of the ruthless scumbag politician who will just kill anybody to gain some power.
Yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and bring in our first caller. This is Shoresh, and he wants to talk about the recent shootings in France. Shoresh, are you with us? If you're saying anything, we can't hear you. No, we can't. Yeah, that's fine. We'll just leave you in while you sort that out. Anyway, I had some comment about Muawiyah. I forgot what it was now. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, I think that, Muawiyah is a case study in a lot of ways about how religious ideals just sometimes aren't practical, and that those who do an end run around them really have an advantage, especially in terms of discriminatory policies. Because Muawiyah, in blatant violation of the commandments of the Quran, that you should take no protectors or friends from the other Abrahamic faiths or non-Muslims, he actually used Christians in his army, and it was key in his winning the three-way war between himself, Ali, and Zubair. You have him stationed. I mean, it was funny because when I was reading the history of this, I kept thinking that it was every bit as interesting and there was as much intrigue as the Three Kingdoms novel of China. And then you have this three-way civil war just like it, with Zubair in the Hijaz. You have was it Baghdad, or was it somewhere else? Somewhere in all Iraq, you had Ali stationed, and then you had, of course, in Syria, you had Muawiyah.
Well, you were talking that the Christians were instrumental and that this helped shape the entire empire.
Yeah, right. Anyway, the fact that you have these provinces with all of these Christians, and they're essentially all just they're protected people. They're not allowed to serve in the military according to the Orthodox caliphs. But when you have a war, a fitna, that is based around all of these, splintering factions and heterodoxies and regional conflicts, who better to have than a group of people from another faith who are just grateful that they're not being discriminated against because you're giving them this opportunity. And then in addition to that, you swell the ranks of your army with people who have no horse in any of the races that these three factions are fighting in. So in other words, Muawiyah just did not suffer from the same problems that Ali did in terms of the lack of unity of command and control.
Yes, hello.
Oh, yeah, there we go. So, welcome to the show. You wanted to talk about the French shooter, Mohammed Merah.
Yes, this fucking asshole who went to shot the innocent people. He say he's doing this for the Palestinians.
Are you still there, Oliver?
But it was a good try.
I guess that guy is half Palestinian, half Russian.
Oh, that's good.
No, I am... No, please do not deny it.
Yeah, you got...
Come on.
Okay. Yeah, as everybody heard about this, there's a guy, he went on some killing spree, and he was killed in a shootout with the police, and the rest is history. Well, I'll feel really silly if that was just an actual Arab guy with just a particularly peculiar accent, and I just kicked him out. But yeah, it certainly sounded like Oliver. But I mean, it's a serious topic, but one that I'm afraid might be kind of a dead end. It was bad. There's nothing we can do about it. Just like all of these other incidents, and there's been such a slow and steady trickle of them that you sort of become callous to it. As a matter of fact, this ties into what you and I were talking about the other day, Stopspamming and I were talking about various clerics that are active in movements in Europe and the United Kingdom in particular. And Stop mentioned this one cleric, and I said, what is he? What's he about? What are his positions, and so forth. And he said, well, he used to be part of this extremist group, but he's left them and distanced himself from them. And he still advocates chopping off of hands and decapitating, but he's nonviolent, or something like that. And I said, stop, wait a minute. Go back and parse that sentence for me. And of course, I knew what he meant, but I think it's kind of tragic that, our definition of nonviolent in terms of a cleric of this faith is that he doesn't espouse really random, gruesome acts against the general population. He can still say, chop off this person's hand for a thought crime, cut off this person's head for a thought crime, and we say, well, at least he doesn't espouse violence. That'd be very disheartening. I don't know how many Muslims actually watch this show, but whether it be this program or whether it be any of the mainstream talking heads who try to see the glass as half full when talking about Islam, the Muslim world, and the epidemic of violence, both within and with Muslim on Muslim violence and violence by Muslims against non-Muslims of this kind, where religion is claimed as a rationale. I can just imagine if you are a Muslim, just an ordinary jean and t-shirt Muslim, and you're hearing this, how disheartening it must be that the rest of the world has such low expectations that all you have to do is say, well, I don't, support the absolute worst, most gruesome, despicable acts, and therefore, you should, that person is considered one of the good ones. It's something I've been thinking about more and more lately. It's really quite unfortunate that the standard is so low, and that the reputation of any group of people could become so bad. And I could issue the usual disclaimer that of course not everyone's religion drives them to this extreme, and other platitudes that we all take for granted, and we don't say just out of political correctness. I mean, it is true that they're a minority within a minority, but it's still a pattern that is undeniable. I don't know what else to say, but yeah, our condolences to the families of the victims of the shooting and so forth. Other than that, I don't know where the topic really goes.
Look at the opposite. I don't know if you guys saw today on the news. I think this is the best way of handling it. If you want to fight a war, do it like they did in Berlin today. Have a pillow fight.
Did they?
Thousands. So you guys, there's thousands of people on this main square at the Brandenburg Gate, and they're having a pillow fight. And I mean that is a way to get rid of all your stuff. I mean all your aggressions and all your adrenaline. That's it.
Okay, let's see. So let's see if I can get another. I'm going to bring.
By the
in,
way, am I the only one dropping off here? Or?
Yeah, your connection seems to be hiccuping pretty bad. When it rains, it pours. I tell you what. I'm going to bring in Jack, who has some comments about Arab atheist statistics. Jack, are you there?
Hello.
Welcome to the program. What do you have for us?
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I have a topic not very related to the topic today, but we have been doing some statistics about atheists.
Some statistics?
Yeah. It's been online only a few days, but I wanted to share it with you.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is this the YouTube page thing that's going around?
Yeah, not YouTube. It's in the easyballs.net.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yep. I did see that one.
Okay, what's it about?
It's about atheists in Arab countries. You have to choose what country you are from and choose. Up to now, there is around 1,400, and Syria is still number one, 17%. Syria, and after that, Iraq 30%, 13, and after that, Iran 30%, Egypt 11, Tunisia also 11, and Saudi Arabia 5%, Morocco 7%. Yes, and all other countries 1%, 2%. Bahrain also 4%, which is impressive because it's a small country.
So, what about overall growth? Is there a rapid? And what I really want to know is how many. I mean, I wonder how they went about collecting this data, because it seems like there's a lot of people who would be afraid.
This is just like a Facebook internet poll type deal. It's not. I mean, this is obviously not going to be very accurate, but I think that reasonably well tracks as far as what the reality is. How, just in pure numbers. Although I think Egypt is probably a little bit higher than Syria and Iraq, but who knows?
I would have thought that Iran would top the charts if I'd had to guess. And of course, we don't really know if these numbers are definitive. It's just a rough indicator. But I would have thought that Iran people were really just openly in revolt against the religious establishment. Of course, that's not necessarily the same thing as rejecting the religion as a whole. But for better or worse, you'd think that a lot of people would just be frustrated with religious institutions and belief.
Yes, but statistic it's in Arabic, so you would expect less Iranians. But I want to. You said this one is not about how many atheists versus believers. No, it's about how many atheists in each country, because you cannot vote only if you are atheist. You just choose the country and vote.
Well, that's interesting to hear.
Oh, so wait. So this is a breakdown of so there's the total number of atheists in the Muslim world, and then it's broken up. It's not how many per country.
Yes,
No,
yes.
but I
It's
understand
how-
this to be voluntary information. In
Okay.
other words, people will go to that page and say, I'm an atheist and I'm in this country.
I misunderstood completely. I thought that was a breakdown per country of the percentage estimate.
No, there may be something like 100,000 atheists in the entire country of Egypt. This is like a pretty liberal estimate. I mean, we're talking out of 85 million people. It's pretty much nothing to speak of.
In total, maybe you'll get something like 5 in 1,000 or 10 in 1,000. We will not get something.
I think Egypt you can find 100,000. Like
Yeah,
I said,
but-
I think that's probably a pretty liberal number, but I think I think that it would be higher than 10,000. I think, at least in Egypt. I don't know about the other smaller countries, but
Even 10,000 still be 1 in 1,000.
right. I'm actually I said about 1 million, but it will be in the high 10,000s. It'd definitely be. It wouldn't be like I would expect maybe Saudi Arabia to have 10,000 or less.
Well, I mean, the key word is find. Could you actually find them? You know,
I think that at least as far you could find the youngest generation pretty easily.
well, now here's like for example, what is the blowback per country? I mean, not going exhaustively. What is the blowback from government and general populace in a lot of these places that would cause a lot of people to be closeted atheists? I mean, even when you come under a lot of soft core pressure, like in a place like the U.S., there are a lot of people who don't advertise their lack of a theistic belief.
Right, and these people, I mean, nobody's out talking about atheism. I mean, these are people you would find in small, like liberal type secular organizations, maybe with maybe small subsections of it that are atheists. People that are generally either on the internet would express their views, or with a very small circle of people in large cities. But as far as actually knowing who these people are, it's not going to be very easy. Nobody wants to say that about themselves and risk. Even people who are atheists in the West also fear of coming out as atheists, just so because of family ties and all these types of things as well. And so even here, you still don't get a pretty clear idea of how many immigrant Arabs tend to leave their religion when they're gone.
Yeah, look at other countries like Bahrain, totally corrupted through the U.S. Army there. So you see the people sitting in their cars with the dish dash smoking a cigarette, something you didn't see 10 years ago. But Jack, are you living in an Islamic country? Do you see atheists? Do you see people that you recognize by their behavior?
In real world, it's not easy. But in internet, yeah, it's always you can find. There are many forms and everything. But in real world, even sometimes you're atheist and your friend is atheist and you don't want him to know, and he or she don't want you to know. And just maybe yesterday, one atheist sentenced to 7 years in jail.
Wow.
Just because he's atheist.
Yeah, that is so sad. This is why I was wondering if you can actually see this, if you can actually recognize them. Is it just that they are not going to the mosque, or is it just that they hang out where you can get alcohol, or is it just something that you don't say in public and you only get this when you are anonymous on a forum or something?
You have to understand that when if you are actually in a Muslim country, you cannot risk anybody knowing that you're an atheist, because all it really takes is one crazy guy with a knife, and you never know who that crazy guy is.
No, it depends where you are. If you're in Bahrain, for example, I mean, it's so... The Islam in Bahrain is really loose. I mean, this is why they cracked down so much, because they were losing control completely. I mean, but the Saudis going to Bahrain. Look, if you go the road, if you take a look at the road between Saudi and Bahrain, you see how many cars there are parked in the desert, which are write-offs because they were drunk, because they go to Bahrain, which is like the whorehouse of Saudi.
But you know, it's not that dangerous like anybody can imagine in the West. If you just said I am atheist to your friend, they will not just kill you or something. But maybe if you said I am atheist to your friend, they will see you in other how can I say? They will not see you like before. They will not respect you anymore. Or but it not.
Okay, so this is what you call in the closet then.
Yeah, yes. But for myself, for example, many of my friends, Muslim, they know I am atheist, but they don't care.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, this is the good news, I think, because it's not as dogmatic as it was 20 years ago.
No, it's not like that. Maybe some people are very extreme, and there are very few. But you don't.
Okay, what do you see as the trend? Because I remember, like 40 years ago, the trend was towards a more secular Islamic state, where in Iran, for example, women did not have to wear the chador so much. Where in Egypt, you hardly saw women, completely veiled up and covered. And then 10, 20 years ago, it started going back into the more dogmatic Islam. Do you think that we see a reversal of this trend again?
No.
I hope. I hope
No,
so.
the answer is emphatically no.
The 80s and 70s, Arab world were very, like you said, it's very secular and everything. But after they see Sahwa Islamiyya, what I don't know what's the name in English. Maybe Aliyah you will translate. Sahwa Islamiyya.
Islamization.
Yeah.
All I know is just, I mean, look at Egypt. You've made the perfect. This is the thing that I always say. Just look at pictures from the 50s and the 60s, and take a picture of the streets every 10 years after that, and gradually you see more and more niqabs, more and more long beards and short galabiyas, and it's not getting any better. It's getting worse
Well,
every
I'd like to say,
single day.
Are you guys worried that maybe you're falling into the same trap that a lot of the very conservative clerics are running into, and that is, excessively convoluting the trappings. All right, looks like we're back.
Okay.
Anyway, what I was saying is, someone could have a theistic belief, sincerely believe that there is a God, sincerely believe it is the God of the Islamic faith, and just be very lax. And, a Saudi cleric with his TV show and his dyed orange beard might be on some crazy rant. And I wonder if we aren't using some of his same arguments. And that's saying, well, this person, shaved their beard, so they're obviously a godless heathen devil, or something like that. So.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure
these
how
people
this
just
is a
are these
trap.
people modern day Umayyads? I remember reading about the history of the Umayyad Caliphate, and there was a lot of tongue-in-cheek religiosity. You have the Umayyad caliphs, and they pay lip service to the religious institution. These imams who lead, or I don't know if they were called imams in this context, but the people who led the Friday prayer would mention the name of the caliph and say, will Allah intercede on his behalf and make sure he makes wise decisions and all this. So there was this alliance of convenience. But I remember reading about one Umayyad caliph who, when he read for the first time the passages in the Quran about prohibitions on drinking, and read other things about prohibitions on music and certain other aspects of the party lifestyle that they'd become accustomed to, essentially the Persian culture of excess that they had adopted. He took a copy of the Quran and used it for archery practice to show that he wouldn't be beholden to these rules. But he was still the leader of the faithful. I realized that the caliph isn't necessarily like the Pope of Islam, more maybe like the Holy Roman Emperor of that civilization. But there were a lot of them. I remember there was this one. I don't know if it was a caliph or some other important person, but he he was drinking wine and someone gave him some grief about it, and he said, well, you know, it was prepared by a slave, and then given to a Christian courier who works in the court, and then he was given to a Jewish courier in the court. The Jew brought it to his cupbearer, who was a Christian. The cupbearer then handed it to him, and he says, well, I can't be sure that it's really forbidden. The only reason I drank it was because of its weakest nod. Roll on snare drum. So, you know, there was a lot of this sort of thumbing their nose at these institutions, or blatantly breaking the rules, you know, but it didn't necessarily mean that they were breaking with the tradition altogether. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, people stay within the religion and just, I don't know how they rationalize it to themselves, if they really think there's an omniscient being, but nevertheless they do it, you know, even though they will tell you that they think at any given time there's a security camera hovering above them looking on it. Apparently they think that there isn't always someone watching them through that security camera, because there are, you know, Christians and Muslims who either lie, cheat, steal, harm others, and do things that are, you know, generally considered to be misdeeds. And then, of course, there are those that violate the dietary habits and those sort of personal issues of piety. Anyway, I've gone a little bit long. The thoughts on the panel on this?
Have I ever told you the story of what happened to us in Tehran? No, this is the practical side, because we got a delivery, and part of that delivery was alcohol. And because there was nobody at home, they parked it outside on the pavement. And then what happened is that one box was sticking into the neighbor's area, and he grabbed it. So he took a whole box of whiskey. Luckily, he was seen, and then my father went and got it back from him and asked him, well, why are you stealing a box of whiskey? Don't you know that you're not allowed to drink it? And he said, no, it's okay, because when I drink the whiskey, I just draw the curtains and then Allah can't see me. So, yes, the 24/7 surveillance camera is not always on.
Right. There's always going to be some of that. I mean, and the rules and expectations that Islam sets up are, they're just so high that, you know, there's just no way you're going to be able to keep yourself from doing natural things that you naturally would do. And Abdel Nasser, I don't know if you guys know any nationalistic history from the 60s and 70s, but he used to say this thing about the Islamists, and he'd always say, we'll go back to the days where people would walk at night so that they're not seen by daylight. And basically, it was, everybody knows this, that religious country means that people will just lie and do what they want to do anyways. But they're going to do it. I mean, the thing is, you can't argue with these people, right? As soon as you start to disagree with them on anything, the first thing they say is, this isn't what I'm saying, this is what God's saying. Are you disagreeing with God? And it's conversation over. And nobody dare say anything about it, at least, you know, not blatantly and in public. Or like Fark Foda and the other guys who've tried, just get killed.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, yeah, there will be both of that. There will be a lot of hypocrisy, but they will still do it for some reason. And I just seem to never learn for some odd. I don't know. They never get it. I mean, it's always the same results. But, you know, yeah, there will be that, of course.
Some people even they don't know. You can say 90% of Muslims, they don't even read hadith, or maybe some of them read Quran, but they don't read hadith. Even if they read Quran, they don't focus on the meaning. They just read it with, you know, some tone and passing some time. That's it. And most of them, they don't care.
So many different strictures in the hadith. I mean, if you look just at the two Sahih collections, there's so many rules governing so many things. I doubt that very few of them really live by all of these rules by heart and know them. I mean, and then all of the spin-off rulings, you know, there's, you know, strictly speaking, music and dance are right out, according to the most orthodox school, and according to the sort of penultimate orthodoxy, you know, men aren't allowed to break dance if it involves the crossing of arms and legs because it's considered too effete. Yet, you know, somewhere out there are Muslims who breakdance. You know, there's so many weird little things that are forbidden.
Dawa films.
Oh, is that who I was trying to be subtle, but thanks. I should just kick your ass right off the show. No, for me, that person is he whose name shall never be spoken. But yeah. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I didn't want to name him in particular because his whole, you know, life here on the internet is so contaminated with politics and so forth. But yeah, that was what I was thinking of, and it's a prime example of, you know, someone who, you know, thinks that they know, you know, these laws very well, and yet someone like myself, who admittedly I've only done very cursory study into this, I've already come into areas where I've said, look, you've done this, and this is flatly forbidden. I mean,
you don't have to know a lot. You can just know specific things that you know will embarrass people into. I think is your Jack? I think said it earlier about a lot of Muslims are now becoming Quranists, or you know, they just follow the Quran and forget about the rest of it. And the reason is, you know, that you can just very easily and very quickly embarrass them into that position. And there is actually quite a bit of that going on.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, I had a guy at work, a Muslim at work, who told me that the Quran says that the earth was created, or the universe was created, in 7 days. And I said to him, it's not 7, it's either 6 or 8, but never 7. And he was arguing about it. He really thought that the Quran said 7 days.
Yeah, most of them like that. They just have this image in their head, and they will not check it out because they actually don't care.
You know,
Exactly.
you should actually ask Muslims when you meet them. You know, they pray 5 times a day, and you know, they pray a specific amount of kneelings and things like that, and just ask them where, you know, if all of that is in the Quran. And you know, see here, and this is the funny part, is when you get them to walk away from the hadiths by, let's say, you know, mentioning the hadith where Aisha breastfeeds adult men so that they can walk in on her, you know, or marrying off 9-year-old
They will deny it.
daughters. You know, they will, you know, very quickly walk away from hadiths because you can just, you know, you just point at them. And as soon as they do that, all you have to do from there on, and then you say, well, do you pray? And when they say yes, well, then you go and say, well, how do you know how to pray? And of course, you know, that's in the hadiths, and so if you walk away from the hadiths, then you can't pray anymore. And so it's a, you know, pretty good position, actually. Watch them squirm.
The Quranic school, they say pray is not, it does not have to, has not to be exactly like specific things and specific gestures. They say just go to the mosque and pray however you want. They are very moderate.
I'm assuming these are people who actually have studied the Quran and the Sunnah and have decided, in fact, that is the case. But most people don't even know that the prayers don't come from the Quran. Most of these people think that the prayers come directly from the Quran, when in fact they don't. Everything they know about how to worship comes from the Sunnah.
No, I think they know that.
Most people
No, they overwhelmingly don't. I have literally yet to find a single person to answer me correctly. Lay people. I'm talking about lay people here. I've yet to find a single person to answer me correctly on that.
Yeah, when I started learning about this stuff, I was really surprised at how low the hadith literacy was amongst lifelong Muslims. You know, I was accustomed to Christians not knowing the Bible, but the Bible's it's like 10 times as long as the Quran, and it was just a fact already. You know, from a distance, I should say, Muslims looked like, pound for pound, they cared much more, and I would have taken them to be much more determined studies of the material, and of course they're very quick to sort of cite the hadith. They're like, well, until you've read the hadith, you can't talk until you've read the hadith. And it turns out often that they've not read them themselves and have no clue what's actually in there. I mean, I can't imagine, even if you've read the Quran and your faith remains intact, how you could possibly read through Sahih al-Bukhari all the way through and not say, this is ridiculous. This is just ridiculous. But
honestly, most Muslims don't read the Quran like somebody who's looking to find out whether or not they're going to adopt this religion. This is not how most Muslims read the Quran. Because if you were going to read the Quran for the meanings of what it is actually saying, you're going to get very little. There is just not very much content there. I mean, I bet you that more than half of the Quran are just repetitions of simple, nonsensical statements when you read them in the light of what we know now. Over half of it has got to be, wailun yawma'izin lil mukazzibin, just ridiculous stuff that doesn't really mean anything. And so, even if they do read it, they don't actually read it to understand what it means. At least for the most part. This is what I find, anyways.
Yeah, they have their favorite passages, their favorite sentences, and the rest is just pick and choose. But then the same goes for the hadiths, where they also pick and choose, and they also go and just say whatever they want. And then if you show them the opposite, then they say, yeah, but I'm still right. And they will never understand. Okay, yeah.
Well, something I find quite interesting is that whilst many, I guess you could say, whilst many Sunnis are becoming Quranists or whatever, many Quranists also become Sunnis. Like, for example, Ramio in 1983 began as a Quranist. And I remember him way back in the day when we first began to dialogue. He pretty much rejected the Hadith collections. But as time went on, more and more, he was forced to draw upon the Hadiths for just information about Muhammad. And more he accepted their validity. Just because, the Quran is so vague and ambiguous. Like, there's almost nothing in there of any kind of, real value, I guess, historically or in regards to law. So it's just that it's fun. I find it funny that whilst Sunnis becoming Quranists, also Quranists will become Sunnis just out of necessity, because without the Hadiths, they've really got nothing.
It's true.
This is really good. This is a really good point that I should start to use as well. That makes a lot of sense, because a lot of these verses make no sense unless you read the corresponding hadiths.
Yeah, but then you have to explain that there are hadiths which have no correspondence in the Quran, and then what?
But I think Quranic scholars is very cool. You know why? Because if we get rid of hadith, then there's no what you can say, apostasy and many things. Also, Quran is it can be interpreted in anything you want. So moderate people, they will go for Quranic. And also there's many imams now, like Adnan Ibrahim and many other people. They are very moderate.
Okay, were you a Muslim for long?
Like 19 years.
Okay, 19 years is quite a long time. But now, when you went to the Friday prayer in the mosque and you heard the guy telling you all these stories, were you actually listening? Were you absorbing this? Or were you just listening to some words and say, yeah, this sounds nice and comfortable? Or what is your sentiment? What went through your head when you heard this for 19 years? Or you heard it for 5 years, let's say?
Yes, they tell hadith and everything that you will like. And just on Friday, I go to mosque on Friday. Sometimes, most times, I get bored. I just watch it finish. And but some hadiths that I like, and some, but I wasn't really religious at all.
Okay, but you heard when you went to the Friday prayer in the mosque, they are using hadiths to create the stories, or are they normally taking the Quran?
No, no, hadith, mostly hadith, because Quran is, there's no like one story that has details and everything. No, in Quran they just one verse and other verse in some other topic, and it's in Quran you cannot find anything arranged. So
You
they
said
give,
a lot of these are actually also just stories.
and also Sirah. Sirah is very nice because it's stories, so you can enjoy it.
Yeah, nice like folklore type stories where, you know, there's a sometimes there's a moral at the end, sometimes it's just to embellish the point, and you know they'll support it with hadiths and stuff, but mostly just really emotional stories with really charismatic people saying them for the most part. I mean, if they're effective.
Yeah, but then when I walked past the mosque, this was in Doha now, opposite the airport, they had a mosque there. Every time I drove past it on a Friday, every second word there was kufar, kufar, kufar.
That's what Islam is about.
Yeah, but this is not always in the hadith or the Quran, but these must have been very, very violent stories. And come on, this was every Friday for months because I drove there like every Friday.
Well, all these stories take place in a time where Muhammad was fighting the kuffars and the imams were fighting the kuffars, and most of these morals come from conflicts with them.
But see, in Western countries or other countries where there's actually kuffar or non-Muslims, the word kuffar becomes something real. But like the country I live in, 99% Muslims, even if they talk about kuffar, it doesn't make any sense. It's just a word for something I have never seen. But in like other countries, I guess your country, for example, there will be something real. When they say kuffar, they have the image of their neighbor or their friend, and this become conflicts. But for me, I went to they say kuffar, whatever. I didn't know. It's just image in my head for some very far people I didn't know. And
okay.
yes.
The thing is, when I first read the Quran, that was the #1 thing that struck me, is how the author was so obsessed with his enemies. Not just because obviously they were his opponents, but just a sort of deep-seated, intractable hatred of people who didn't agree with his teachings and so forth. And just on almost every page, it has an insult or a threat, whether, you know, a threat of violence in this life or a threat of you know, damnation in the next. It features on almost every page of some editions, depending on the size and font of the Quran that you have. You know, almost every double leaflet has at least one mention of the non-believers, and it's always unsavory. But the thing is, I found that, you know, of Muslims that are acquainted with what it says, many of them have rationalized it away and talk about the kuffar of the Quran as though there's some hypothetical construct, or at least there's a dissociation between the kuffar of the Quran and actual non-believers. Because I've had conversations with Muslims who, in theory, hate me, but in practice don't treat me in any kind of a hateful way. You know, I mean, if you just sort of poke them a little bit with a stick about what they think, you can get them on go on this long rant that sounds like it's out of some crazy, you know, malicious newsletter. And then when they calm down and get it out of their system, they're like, okay, so you want to go have lunch? And it's like, well, does it bother you that technically I'm part of the group of people that you were just railing against? He says, no.
No, see, I think all religious people, they have this like a separate word for religion. It's an abstract word. I cannot understand why. Because, for example, they believe in God and everything, but when you ask them, can God, for example, they lost someone they love, I'll say, can God save him? Say, yes. But why didn't he do that? Because they have another word for the religion. It doesn't conflict with the real word, for most of them.
Yeah, that's why I always saw there's a difference between the theory and the practical life.
Yeah, this is actually funny. We were talking about, we had the we have our show in Arabic, and we actually have had this Muslim come on the last couple times. Really nice guy, by the way. Great person. But you know, it's funny because the last program was about violence in Islam, and how, you know, is it really the religion of peace when you've got all these, you know, open calls to aggressive conflict, and the guy kept saying that violence was only okay for specific reasons, and then you'd say something like, well, you know, Muhammad was fighting the kuffar just because they were Muslims, and basically he made this thing where he would say, yes, it was okay back then to spread Islam, but then when you said to him, well, then do you think that we should go to war with the West and try to spread Islam there the same way? He'd say, no, 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 it's not the same thing. But then you could never really get him to explain why it is that it was okay when Muhammad did it. But now, for some reason, you know, they don't want to keep doing that anymore. But he just, you know, he believes that, and he holds those two concepts in his head, that it was okay at some point, now it's not okay, no reason whatsoever.
Everybody has some separate religion in their heads, but you can see Muslims, they are same, but no, everybody has different. I was discussing with someone about the existence of God. He said, you cannot say God exists. I said, why? He said, if something exists, that means it has a beginning and it is something. So God doesn't exist. I say, okay, I agree with you. God doesn't exist. No, God is out of everything. So they will just justify anything, and some people have even strange ideas.
Well, thanks a lot, Jack. We certainly got a lot of mileage out of you. We appreciate it. Come back anytime. Salam.
Okay, I will be watching you on Blog.
Okay, take care. I'm going to bring in, if he's still at his keyboard, I'm going to bring in Marco Polo, the Marco Polo, who is going to talk about a book he's read called The Heirs of the Prophet Muhammad. While he's connecting, Klingschor, we started without you. There was a huge mix-up as far as the time is concerned, so this one time I won't give you any grief.
Any grief.
Yeah.
No strikes.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
So, by the way, is the topic still Islamic expansion?
Well, yeah, I was going to bring it back to that. Stop has already talked. Anachronistically, he talked about Muawiyah first, but you, of course, were going to take Muhammad, and then you were going to take Muhammad off of my hands because I hit a wall and I just couldn't read through this whole of the surah. I mean, everyone, when we drew straws for our original format to see who would cover these different generals. And, you know, there was a point, you know, where I really enjoyed reading about the lore, but when they gave me the copy of the Sirat Rasulullah, and I'm starting to read about this guy's life to do the coverage of Muhammad's battles and his biography, I hit a wall like a marathoner, and I thought, I just can't read about this guy's life anymore. I really am having a hard time carrying. But Klingschor, of course, has all this knowledge already at his fingertips. So why don't we go over the early battles, the major, you know, Badr, Uhud, and so forth. Just history channel us a little bit, and we're gonna let Marco go since he's either AFK or we just can't get a connection from him.
Cool. All right. Well, essentially, the first, I mean, of course, as demonstrated, I think the last show, these sources are, you know, tenuous and extremely late, like 200 years after the events they purport to explain, but hey, let's give it a shot. Muhammad, the first conflicts that Muhammad engaged in were the raids, wherein Muhammad would go out with his followers from the city of Yathrib, better known as Medina, and attack caravans and neighboring tribes. And the main impetus for this was that well, it was money, and like we even have these records. For example, the oldest source for the Battle of Badr, which is Urwa ibn al-Zubair, if I'm correct, states that when Muhammad rode out to attack a Meccan caravan, those who rode with him They had no thoughts in their head but for the booty to be won from the Qurayshites. The first real battle was the Battle of Badr, which was when they went out to raid a Qurayshi caravan. The Quraysh got away safely, but they sent a counter army. And Muhammad managed to win. He just managed to get ahead and to set up the not an ambush, but he managed to get the high ground, so to speak. And so he defeated the Quraysh there. The next battle, I'm not sure if the Ain al-Qara affair probably doesn't count as a battle. The next proper battle was the Battle of Uhud, wherein Muhammad was actually defeated and fled back to Yathrib with his tail between his legs. After that, the next real conflict was the Battle of the Trench, wherein the Quraysh decided to put an end to Muhammad once and for all. They gathered together quite a large army and went to besiege Muhammad, but unfortunately there was a big storm and they ended up having to pull off the siege and retreat. After this, we have the Muthalib raid, in which Muhammad attacks the Muthalib tribe, and it's at this point that the issue of al-azl, I think, coitus interruptus, comes up, wherein Muhammad said, yes, you can. Effectively, he said, don't bother pulling out with the slave girls who you want to rape. Don't bother using coitus interruptus because no form of birth control can trump Allah and what Allah has designed to be. And so basically he's saying, yeah, just don't even bother pulling out. You know, if the slave girl you're raping gets pregnant, hey, it's all in Allah's hands. The next real battle was the conquest of Khaybar, wherein Muhammad took a force and went and invaded the Jewish strongholds of Khaybar, and basically just he massacred them. The hadith literature records that they snuck up during the night, the Muslims did, and in the morning the Jews were coming out with their shovels and spades and things, and that's when the Muslims attacked them. When they were coming out to work in their fields and orchards. Anyway, so there was a bit of first there was a bit of a general slaughter, but then the remaining Jewish strongholds, because there was a series of strongholds, basically sued for peace, and the dhimmi system was established. The conquest of Makkah doesn't really. Oh no. The Romans, right? So this one's one that I quite enjoy. Muhammad sent out letters all throughout as his prophetic career was advancing, and he was becoming more and more influential. He was conquering more areas, and he sent out letters to all the great rulers around the Middle East, saying, "Convert to Islam, please." However, his emissary to Syria was murdered by the Ghassanid Arabs. And so, in response to this, Muhammad got together an army, and went up to, teach the Ghassanids a lesson. However, when his army got up there, there just happened to be a Byzantine Roman army camped in the region, and so the Muslim force foolishly decided to attack the Byzantines. And to cut a long story short, they got their asses kicked and they fled back to Makkah, or Yathrib, rather. Another significant battle was the Battle of Hunain, wherein...
Can I interject a question?
Sure.
What do scholars say about the discrepancy between this early defeat at the hand of the Byzantines and the later blitzkrieg that people like Ibn al-Walid launched against the same said forces? I mean, it really is a remarkable... The northward advance is remarkable. It's like if you had NATO versus the Warsaw Pact, U.S. and Soviet Union, back in during the Cold War, and some non-aligned power suddenly, with all this force, rolled over both parties, annexed much of their territory, and made them sign often humiliating treaties to avoid further hostilities. What made the difference? Was it? Does it boil down to the tactical brilliance of Khalid ibn al-Walid, or are there more?
Well, I mean, the leader of the actually, what happened was that the leader of the Muslims was Zayd ibn Harith, Muhammad's adopted son, and he was killed. And then the next leader, the second in command, was also killed. And then the third in command, so that their leadership was killed very early on in the battle. And so the command fell apart. And actually, Khalid ibn al-Walid, only his discipline was able to keep the Muslims together, to stop them from just like running away in a panic. Instead, he was able to get them to retreat in an orderly fashion, and keep together. Also, the Muslim sources overplay the Byzantine presence. Having read, the analysis of modern military historians, they reckon that there wasn't really that many Byzantine soldiers. The main enemy would have been the Ghassanids themselves, with a detachment of Roman soldiers.
So
in the
basically,
area.
to make so they lose to the
It was
Ghassanids.
Arabs versus Arabs.
Right. So they lose to the Ghassanids, and then in order to make it seem less humiliating, they say, well, there was this massive Roman army that came down. Is that
There were some Romans, but I think it just got overplayed, as people tend to. I mean, 20,000 Romans defeated us, rather than just a couple of thousand Romans with a large, with Ghassanids. Of course you've got to overplay it. I mean, if you lost, right, you don't want to say you lost to a couple of Romans and some Arab tribes. You want to say, yes, an entire massive, Byzantine army, 20,000 strong. Well, you've got to save some face. If you lose, you want to lose massively. But yeah. Another significant battle in 630 CE was the Battle of Hunain, where Muhammad went down and invaded the Hawazin tribe. And the Hawazin tribe had some cool tactics, but in the end, Muhammad was victorious, and he took all their property and all their women captive. And then when the Hunain men converted to Islam, he said to them, okay. And they said, okay, so now we're Muslims, so give us our land back, give us our wives back. And Muhammad said, you have to choose between getting your land and your wealth back or getting your wives back. So thankfully they chose getting their wives back. So the justice of the Prophet, eh? That was followed swiftly thereafter by the siege of El Taif, when Muhammad, attacked the city, but he failed. He was not able to impregnate the city, and he had to retreat. Then in 630 CE again, a little bit later on, Muhammad heard that rumors that there was a giant Byzantine and Arab army amassing to the north, planning an invasion of his little state or polity. So he got together an army and sent it up. However, it turned out it was just a rumor and there was no big invasion. So he just subjugated some local, Christians and Jews and forced them to accept the jizya. And that's really is all of Muhammad's significant military endeavors.
Of the peninsula did he have under his control
By his death?
at the time of his death? Because there's some modern historians that say that it was actually Abu Bakr that the Ridda conflicts were actually the final consolidation and not the enforcement of a previous consolidation of power over the peninsula as a
that's
whole.
true. That's true. Muhammad only controlled the Hijaz, Yemen, and Oman.
So he did win his rematch with Taif, right?
No, what happened was Taif, when he began to send out letters and stuff later on, no. sorry, they're called the Year of Delegations or the Year of Ambassadors, where after, like, just before his death, in let's see, it was in 631. Tribes and kingdoms within Arabia began to send, because Muhammad had become like the local strong man of all Arabia. Like, he was the most powerful bloke there, or one of the most powerful. And so people began to come and to make alliances with him and so forth. So directly, his territorial control was the Hijaz, Yemen, and Oman. But he also had like alliances with lots of other tribes across Arabia, and I think that was the approximately the situation. And then after his death, Abu Bakr basically used apostasy and turned it into this, well, imperial expansion. So Muhammad did not actually control all of Arabia, like territorially. He only actually controlled the Hijaz, Yemen, and Oman. Anywhere else, they were just his allies. So like America doesn't control Britain; they're just allies. But yeah.
So what about Syria? How come somebody was sent to Syria as a governor when they didn't control the area yet?
Was this the emissary who was murdered by the Ghassanids?
No. I'm talking about Muawiyah, the first caliph of the Umayyads.
Oh, well, I mean, Abu Bakr, under his reign, they took control of most of Syria.
Ah, yeah. Okay. So this was post-Muhammad.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great, because I didn't make that connection.
And have you guys?
I'll stop typing these responses in the chat since there's a break in the conversation. Someone is asking about the different timelines of different invasions, like when did the Huns and Mongols arrive relative to these battles. Let's see, the Huns had, in a sense, already come and gone, not truly gone, but settled. I mean, the West had fallen, the Western Roman Empire had fallen completely by this time, and there were the various Germanic kingdoms in its place, right?
No, actually. I'm not. When did the?
Yeah, because I mean, it was they were basically saying a eulogy for the Western Roman Empire, and Rome and Ravenna had already fallen by the time.
Yes.
I think essentially by the time.
Yes. The Franks, the kingdom of the Franks had been established in basically from Germany to Spain. Spain was controlled by the Visigoths.
Yeah, and then someone was asking about the Mongolians, and the Mongolians arrived. They were of the same age as the Crusades, so they're much later.
Yes.
They're 2 dynasties away. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, it was a remarkable campaign, and the way they just completely face rolled the 2 superpowers of their day. You know, I mean, whatever other issues, as a military campaign, it certainly deserves credit as being one of the most impressive of all time. And I think that Ibn al-Walid definitely deserves the lion's share of the credit. I mean, there were other competent commanders like Ibn al-As who annexed Egypt, but without any proper siege equipment and just the use of these sort of like Hannibal-esque envelopment tactics, just like the Carthaginians used against the Romans, just time and time again, Ibn al-Walid annihilated these armies on the field, leaving whole areas unprotected and easily annexed. I mean, it really was, and the way it's really remarkable because you have multiple theaters, and Ibn al-Walid wins in Persia with one hand tied behind his back, and then quickly, according to both, the tradition and the available history is popularly interpreted, he whips the Persians quickly, like changing mounts so that he can go as fast as he can. You know, when he wears out one mount, he immediately takes another. He quickly goes and repositions and asserts command over the forces taking over Syro-Palestine and whips the Romans there as well. And it really just he's called the Sword of Islam by Muslim historians, and really without him, I can't help but wonder if any of it would have really taken off. I wonder if Islam ever would have left the peninsula if not for him.
I doubt it, because I mean, when Abu Bakr sent his first army against Muslama ibn Habib el-Hanifa, that's Musaylima the liar. The first time he was defeated, Musaylima had a big army. He had a strong base over in the Najd, over in central eastern Arabia. He had a large following there, one that was just as devout as Muhammad's. However, then Khalid ibn al-Walid was called upon to take on Musaylima, and of course, the Muslim forces won. But I mean, it is extremely impressive. The Arab conquests they're quite remarkable. However, when people say, the issue that I take is when Muslims say, and therefore God exists. How else can you explain the rapid conquests? Like, ignoring like the Mongols and Alexander the Great. And so I thought I'd read you this quote, which helps to contextualize why the Arabs were so successful. And this is from Ira M. Lapidus, his History of Islamic Societies, page 34. Quote, "The reasons for the relatively rapid success of the Arab-Muslim conquests are not hard to find. The Byzantine and Sasanian, so Persian, empires were both militarily exhausted by several decades of warfare prior to the Arab-Muslim invasions. The Christian populations, the Copts in Egypt, the Monophysites in Syria, and the Nestorians in Iraq, all had long histories of troubled relations with their Byzantine and Sasanian overlords. Their disaffection was important in the cases where Christian Arab border tribes and military auxiliaries joined the conquerors and where fortified cities capitulated. The conquests, then, were due to victories over militarily weakened powers and were consolidated because local populations were content to accept the new regime. The conquests were further secured by a large migration of Arabian peoples. With the defeat of the Byzantine and Sasanian empires, a frontier between populations broke down, leading to a massive movement of people from Arabia into the lands of the Middle East." Unquote.
What about the role of the religion in terms of its impact in military morale and solidarity?
I am skeptical of that. I mean, given that most of Muhammad's followers only became his followers after he went to Yathrib, when he began to raid, when he was making money, it seems I'm extremely doubtful that religious conviction, that's like a very common cliche, and a very, classical reason for the people would cite for why they are so successful. I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. I mean, most of the, Islam hadn't even formed yet. Like, most of them wouldn't have been familiar at all with any of the Quran. There's just nothing there. It was all was what? Stories about this prophet guy over in Yathrib doing some cool stuff. Like, it seems very unlikely to me.
Okay, I read
King, is this a matter of...
Let's go to Stop. Stop hasn't talked in a while.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. Do you think this is a case of, okay, I'm going to be a pirate. I am going to plunder some commercial caravans, and here's why I'm allowed to do that.
What do you mean?
Well, that he was abusing the spiritual side, saying that there's somebody who's coming to talk to me and saying that I am allowed to do whatever I want to. Allah says, allow everything that Muhammad allows and obey Muhammad.
I'm not saying that Muhammad was insincere. All I'm saying is that I highly doubt that most of his followers were really passionately inspired by the religion.
Well, you made the example of the Mongols earlier. Wasn't Genghis Khan like huge on fortune tellers and that type of deal? I mean, wouldn't it be fair to say that if that's the case, then the fortune tellers were the reason that Genghis Khan conquered all
maybe
all the
Genghis
lands he
Khan.
would?
But I mean, perhaps for Genghis Khan himself. But I'm just skeptical that the majority or the overwhelming majority of his followers. I mean, look at the Umayyads, right? They're like very quickly after Muhammad's death, they take over. I mean, they drink. They have, all these hundreds and hundreds of wives and concubines, and they gamble. I mean, well, what's up with that? They're clearly not pious. They're clearly quite irreligious. So, I mean, I would just take that as an example of how these.
Well, I was just saying back to the point, like, Atheismo is saying that, some you'll hear Muslims say something like, oh, they spread so rapidly because Islam, in one way or another. And you said then, how do you explain Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great and all these other great conquests that were very quick? And, what I was saying was then, if they were going to say that Islam was the reason that it was so, almost miraculous, I guess, so to speak, if they, in the way they put it, then I would say that, well, then would you give it that Genghis Khan's reason for being so successful were his supernatural beliefs, or was it more of what along the line of what you were saying, which is geopolitical, powers being depleted and distressed populations helping the conquerors and things of that nature, which is, and I'm sure Genghis Khan had his own geopolitical forces at work at that point, not in fact his fortune tellers that caused his rapid climb up the imperial ladder.
Tell you a little quick,
I mean, are you guys familiar with the Mahdi of the Sudan?
Yep.
Wait, are you talking about Ibn wait, is it Tarabi? Or are we talking about an ancient figure?
No, we're talking about one who was quite modern. Let me just check what his...
I think it was Hassan Tarabi.
I don't know the name. I just know that he was known as the Mahdi, that he loved being called that.
Yes, okay. So the Anglo-Sudan War, and this is after this was how Anglo-Egyptian Sudan was established. Basically, there was a guy in the Sudan who called himself the Mahdi, gathered together an army, killed... Who did he kill? Was it Gordon? I think Charles George Gordon, just some famous British general, killed him, took over the Sudan, established a fanatical religious state there. But not for very long. When the British and the Egyptians went down to kick his ass, he told all his followers that they would be bulletproof. And so, inspired by their religion, they went up and they were slaughtered. So, I mean, it all depends on other factors. I mean, the fact that they were inspired, I think, wasn't enough. But even then, I mean, I just don't see.
Well, for the record, the person I was talking about was someone. I was thinking of someone completely different. I didn't, so I rescind that. Yeah, I think that when you use religion as a basis of morale, you create morale among your forces that's very hard but very brittle. And that is, you have people who fight with such determination until they reach a point where they see the writing on the wall, and then they realize that either they've been tricked, they didn't have God on their side, or God has forsaken them for some reason or another. And then, of course, everything falls apart rather quickly at that point. There's a similar story in the Indian Wars between the U.S. cavalry and the various Indian nations, wherein I think it was Sitting Bull's brother gave some prophecy that these Indian warriors would be, magically protected. And completely unharmed if they attacked this one fort. And when they attacked, they were actually winning, but because they saw that they were taking some casualties, they thought that the charm or blessing wasn't working, so they retreated, even though there's some historians will say they would have won if they'd kept pushing. So it's very much a double-edged sword when you feed people that sort of thing and say that you're having, you have divine guidance on, because then it's all a game of confirmation bias. And
but then again, does it really matter whether or not it was successful? I mean, let's say that Islam itself was a huge factor in the rapid, expansion of the Muslim empire. Let's just grant that, okay? Don't you then have to grant that Alexander's Greek gods were also powerful in that, and that Genghis Khan's fortune tellers were powerful? Don't you then have to grant it to the other gods that you don't really want to grant them to? Does it really matter whether or not it was successful? I mean, it might have been. Who knows, right? But even if it was, does it really matter at that point?
Actually,
like I said, if you're going to say that you have an all-powerful being backing you up and you can't be defeated, and then you are, even on a small scale, you have a lot of explaining to do. I mean, it's really, the true miracle of Islam is that it lasted a day longer than the result of the Battle of Uhud, wherein Muhammad came forward and said, okay, I just got a revelation. We're going to lose this battle. Aren't I a great prophet? He gets a prophecy of something that already happened and then states the completely obvious. And he says, okay, the angel Gabriel... I can imagine. I mean, sometimes whenever he interacts with Gabriel, Muhammad suddenly becomes a very sympathetic figure in my eyes, because you can imagine, because he was wounded during this battle, and I think this was the battle where he was so hard pressed, and this is when Ibn al-Walid didn't he fight against Muhammad in this battle? Yeah, so I mean, Ibn al-Walid, even before he joined the Muslims, he was a force to be reckoned with. So he's injured, nearly loses his life, actually has to play dead on a pile of corpses to avoid being captured, and just sort of, he just hope that they don't recognize him. And so the fact that he was able to talk his way out of that one is remarkable. But if we're going to assume that the traditional narrative was an accurate one, that is, if we're going to believe that the angel Gabriel is a real being and really did interact, I can just imagine Muhammad's consternation with this angel when he's there, he's got the gaping one on his side, he's sitting down, and then poof, the angel Gabriel appears, and Muhammad's first word to him must have been, where the fuck have you been? And he's like, hey, I'm glad you're that prophet guy from the cave, right? I gave you the message? Yeah, I got a message for you. Don't go and fight in the Battle of Uhud. You're going to lose for the following reasons. And he's like, I know that, you dumb shit. Look at this, gaping wound down my side. Where were you? How am I'm going to look like the biggest asshole going out there to all those people who are looking to me and say, okay, I just got a prophecy of why we're going to lose the battle we just lost for self-evident reasons. And yet, he talked his way out of that one, okay? Say what you want about him. That motherfucker had charisma.
Muhammad, he must have been a very, very convincing guy, because the Quraysh were no dummies, okay? These were smart people. When you read some of the surahs where he's bringing revelations to answer Quraysh's questions, they are asking the questions that any skeptical smart person would ask today. I mean, these were the same questions that I was asking, and his answers were no good. And so, however he said these things, he must have been just really good salesman, because these answers were so ridiculous. It must have solely depended on his ability his charisma, exactly. It must have been, because they're not very convincing on their own. When you read them, when you read the Quraysh's questions and you read his answers to them, Quraysh they were spot on, man. They nailed them.
This is another area where I become kind of sympathetic with him, is that, like what Klingschor was talking about, early withdrawal during coitus, coitus interruptus. He would not, let's face it, he wouldn't have talked about that unless people were bothering him with questions regarding it. So, I mean, so it really reminds me, I don't know if any of you have seen The Invention of Lying with Ricky Gervais, where there's all these people looking up at him, asking all these silly questions and nagging him about this and that. You know, it's, every time he comes down with some sort of bizarre rule, I wonder, was this some sort of idiosyncrasy of his, or were people sort of pecking at him and hounding him about it to the point where he had to give a ruling about it and say that it was revealed?
Well,
Yeah,
yes, one of my favorite movies. I use it in many of my videos.
No, he clearly does this all the time. I mean, you can, yeah,
Exactly.
you know, the best demonstration of this is when there is, you know, suspicion that Aisha was sleeping with some guy on the way back from one of his battles, and
Mustalik raid.
right, exactly, and you know, it's so obvious that he has no idea, and he must have just sat down and spoke with Aisha and said, look, I'm gonna give a revelation that this never happened, but you better not fucking say anything to anybody. You know, like I could just imagine, because he then gets a revelation that clears her of this, you know, supposed, but you know, who really knew, right? I mean, but it's just, you know, he must. A lot of people were talking about this Aisha thing when he then finally gave in to the pressure and came, you know, a revelation came that cleared her of this. But so
Back to the loss at the Battle of Uhud, he gets revelations from this angel who just, I mean, Gabriel is just fashionably late again and again and again, and you can, like I said, you can imagine his frustration. It's like, why can't you be more punctual? You're an angel. You either have wings or you teleport. I mean, Gabriel must have had AADD, Angel Attention Deficit Disorder, because he's just portrayed as this bumbling idiot.
he was off his meds that week.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, so what's the great prophecy? And Gabriel's like, oh, well, Allah is the greatest and most forgiving. Want to ride bikes? You know, in the actual Battle of Uhud, you had a problem that there was one contingent of archers positioned on the mountainside, and they abandoned their posts when it looked like they were going to win. But really, Khalid was pulling a trick on them that he would use many times against the Persians and Byzantines, and that was he feigned a retreat of part of his contingent, made it look like part of the army had gone home, when in reality they were just in a very circuitous flanking maneuver. And he would do this. This is one of the things that Walid would do again and again and again. Is he was you know, he might as well have had a copy of The Art of War by Sun Tzu underneath his pillow, because time and time again he will, you know, take sections of his army and make it seem that they're retreating, you know, bait them into, you know, make it seem like his entire army is withdrawing and lead them into a trap and so forth. That was just time and time again he managed to pull that off. There was one point where the terrain was a bit uneven, and he drew out his enemy by having his cavalry sort of march in place, and it kicked up so much dust over the horizon that they thought that their opponents, I think it was the Byzantines, thought that they were retreating. So they go in headlong pursuit with their infantry, and then immediately get enveloped in every direction with his camelback light infantry, and they're completely annihilated. So, you know, like I said, I really don't think it would happen with al-Walid. As a matter of fact, Ibn al-Walid, the so-called Sword of Islam, he almost ended the life of the Prophet and the religion in its cradle at Uhud. You know, if Muhammad had not, you know, had this escape where he just narrowly got away with his life, you know, the sword of Islam would mean something very different. You know, he would have. Anyway, but there was one anecdote I wanted to show before I kick it back to someone else. And if anyone else wants to call in, especially any Muslim callers who want to call in, just send a contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show on Skype, and tell us how you'd like to be introduced and what you want to talk about. There was one story written by some Byzantines living in Egypt, which of course was Byzantine territory at the time before it was invaded and conquered by the Arab Muslims. The Arab army under Al-As had come out and encircled the city and had the bulk of its, I don't know if they encircled it, but they had the encampment outside, and were laying a very low-tech siege against the city, just waiting for an army to come out and fight them. They had no proper siege equipment, so it was just a waiting game until such a time that they either capitulated according to the terms, convert, pay the rate, or die. And there were these two young noblemen who went out on their horses to sort of look at these enemies, these foreigners, and see what they were like. And it's in the evening. They're getting a little bit closer, trying to get a good look at them from this vantage point. And then this one outrider, who's an Arab outrider with a spear, sees them and makes a beeline for them on his camel. Now they turn around, and because these are sort of ponies, for rich people, they're not war horses, they're not racing steeds. The guy on the camel is catching up to them, and he runs one of them through with a spear and dumps his body on the ground, and his other friend, just terrified, flees back to the city. And once he makes it back to the wall, he looks around at the Arab guy, and the Arab pulls a spear out of the dead person, doesn't take the pony, doesn't take anything off the person of this, this rich young man, doesn't take a scrap of clothing, doesn't search his pockets, doesn't even dismount. He just turns around and heads back to the encampment like nothing had happened. And it left a very indelible impression on, it's just a very stark account of the value systems. And the survivor wrote something about the effect of how, he realized that this was not like the other enemies that they had faced. These guys weren't necessarily in it for plunder. There was idealism behind it. They were fighting for something just a little bit more, although there certainly would be loot. And, like the history of the Umayyads tells us, when the Arabs actually got a hold of the territory, they really fell victim to a lot of the temptations that these lands offered. But at the time, inasmuch as it was a fanatical force driven by a mission statement that was a little bit not so, what I want to say, not so worldly. It did have a drastic impact on the morale of the invading forces. And I think that that can't be underestimated in of itself. So, Klingschor, stop. Anything more on the campaigns?
No.
We have another caller just in time. We have Gunderson wants to say something about the attack on Khaybar.
Hello?
Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling in. What do you have for us?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I had to mute the blog TV. Yes, about the attack on Khaybar. Obviously, I'm sure you all know there was some, at least alleged incident of, the treasure of the tribe being violently tortured for, to find out where the treasure was. Well, I've often heard, Muslims who, when you bring this up, they'll say, the only evidence for this is in, the, is it the Sirah? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, the Sirah, or Sirat Rasulullah. The life of Muhammad.
Yes, they say the only evidence, the only, citation is in the Sirah, and there's no, legitimate source for it. Is that actually true?
Yes. However, I would point out that this tale comes from, the oldest source for the life of Muhammad that we have in Islam. Whether I can't say whether or not it's true.
And you'd also have to you'd also have to let them know that if that was the trick they were pulling, then they would have to forfeit the rest of the history, because that's where it is too. They play a very dangerous game when they do this kind of thing, because then they've got no ground to stand on when they want to make other points using the same texts.
Oh, so you mean when they you know, when they want to pull out something good that Muhammad allegedly did.
Yes, the Constitution of Medina is a great example. The Constitution of Medina is found in the Sir Rasul, in Ibn Ishaq. And I don't know, I'm not really sure why they pulled this out to praise it, because having read it, I mean, I've gone through and I've taken some choice quotes, which I think are kind of a bit problematic from the Constitution or the Medina Charter. However, yeah, most Muslims are like, yeah, it forms this great bond between Jews and Christians and Muslims, or Jews and Arabs and Muslims in Yathrib and stuff, and blah blah, and they'll always like to pull that out. But this is from Ibn Ishaq, so I don't believe that it's found in al-Bukhari or any other hadith collection. So.
Well, here's the thing. There's a wide variety of stories about the early military career of, the entire military career of Muhammad and his commanders while he was still alive. And while he was still alive, it was definitely about loot. I think really the first two Rashidun caliphs played a huge role. Well, actually, come to think of it, what's his name? Abu Bakr, of course, was saying he wouldn't let the other Arabs withhold a single coin of the tax that they had to pay. It seems like Abu Bakr also was a little bit about the loot and not entirely on principle. But I mean, there's a wide variety of anecdotes from the histories and the hadith about how starting a religion cost Muhammad a lot of money. It needed funding, and there were disputes. As a matter of fact, the part about the Battle of Uhud, about the archers abandoning their position, that was because they saw that so many of the enemy units were occupied that they actually went down and started to raid the baggage train. And some of the early followers from the early Medina period were both Hijazi Arabs and also some South Arabians who were basically mercenaries or privateers. So during his phase, he hung out with a very rough crowd of people who really didn't seem to make any bones about the fact that they were bandits. But by the time you get Umar was very puritanical, and his reform. First of all, Umar kicked all of the Jews and Christians and other minority sects out of the peninsula as best as he could. It was a mass deportation. To the client kingdoms neighboring. So basically, all the Jews and Christians had to either go to the Ghassanid territories, or there was a similar client kingdom that the Persians had in all Iraq. So he was very puritanical. I think he was the first person to include strictures that the non-Muslims would have to wear distinctive clothing and have other provisions that sort of marked them out for Muslims. He was very against even mild integration or association between
Umar?
Muslims and any of the protected peoples. And basically, even though Uthman would change this, originally Umar's vision of the conquered territories was essentially that, first of all, during his reign, he did not want Muslims owning land in the conquered territories. He basically set them up so that they were like the samurai class of Japan, wherein the peasants own the land and the samurai own the peasants, and so that way they wouldn't be there wouldn't be too much mixing up of blood and ideas with the locals, and they would just be that basically the Muslims would be the warrior caste of the civilization. But of course, immediately after he dies and Uthman takes over, this starts to soften more and more. So I think that Umar was in many ways far more puritanical than Muhammad ever was, and far less concerned about worldly gain and more about the spread of ideology. And he measured success not so much in financial terms, but in political and ideological.
Yeah, but hang on. We need to see that the Sirah is not only Ishaq. We also need to see that there are several biographies. And in those biographies, you see that Muhammad is anything from the war hero to the war coward. Who had like I don't know how many people deep standing in front of him protecting him. So the Sirah is a matter of just pick and choose. You take the ones that you like, and all the other ones are lies. They are fabrications. It's incredible. I mean, the stuff you read there is absolutely wonderful. And the thing is, you need to remember, this is 300 years after Muhammad, because everything from Ibn Ishaq is lost. We don't have anything extant. Everything is from Ibn Hisham, and he says quite honestly that he has filtered everything.
Years. 150 years after Muhammad.
Yeah, but what Ibn Hisham then says, if you
No.
together
Ibn Hisham.
and Ibn Hisham, then
Ibn
you
Hisham
end
is
up with-
150 years. Ibn Ishaq is like 125 years or 100 years. Ibn Hisham is 150 years. That's my understanding.
Okay, cool. But what I'm saying is, it's not contemporary or anything. It's decades later. This is the whole point. This is all hearsay. This is all somebody saying something about somebody else, and then Ibn Hisham, because we have nothing from Ibn Ishaq available, Ibn Hisham then filters it out again, and then from that you have the other sirats. And so it's not only this one Ibn Hisham book; it's several, and they get more and more bizarre as you go along on the timeline. It's crazy what you hear there. I mean, if you read that water rises up out of the well towards Muhammad's mother when she was pregnant with him, just so that she didn't have to bend down so much. When she gave birth, the palaces of Syria were lit up out of from the light emitting from her pudendum. Oh, this is crazy stuff.
Yeah, although I think that
they either have to pick and choose, and then you can point out they're doing that, or they can accept it all or reject it all. I mean,
yeah, but it's
really
superstition and just the occult. I mean, you can read anything about Sagittarius or Aries and put anything you want in there, and the same is true for the Sirah.
As a matter of fact, a lot of people say that that's kind of what happened. They a lot after Muhammad's death, they incorporated a lot of the Jewish, Christian, and some of the myths that were around at that time.
Yeah.
A lot of people
It's
say
folklore.
Yeah, a lot of it
I've got
is.
an argument at the moment going with somebody who says to me, "Yeah, but Muhammad lived like a pauper," and I showed them a sentence in the hadith in Bukhari which says, your God Allah made Muhammad a wealthy man. And it says that verbatim, and then explains how come Muhammad is so rich. And they will go and they will say me, they will tell me, no, that is not what it says. It's the opposite, because Muhammad gave away everything. He was a poor man. Bull dust.
That's not true. Muhammad was he had a lot of money, but he had a lot of wives and a lot of children.
Yeah, but the thing is, what
there-
people see is that the Muhammad that they know is in Arabia, and in the Arabian Peninsula they didn't have palaces. So pointing out
servants were they were a very high indicator of wealth. And Muhammad
exactly.
had a few. He had slaves, and that was a good sign of wealth, considering his own.
But this is exactly what you are saying is right. That the level of how you determine the wealth of somebody is totally different when you compare Arabia to Europe. And this is why they say, well, the gauge, the yardstick that I'm applying is the word palace. And they say, well, he didn't have a palace. I said, well, it doesn't matter whether he had a palace. He had all the slaves and all the maids and women and handmen and whatever. This is the yardstick that was applicable in Arabia. And then if you read the hadiths, if you read in Sirah, you see the same thing. So don't talk to me about Muhammad being a pauper.
Muhammad wasn't exactly into the finer arts, if you will. I mean, this is a guy who barely knew how to plant a tree, you know what I mean? It's not... This isn't a guy who was going to go out and seek architects from, I don't know, wherever the hell they had him at that time. But that wasn't his deal. He was, you couldn't. I mean, the Islamic buildings and arabesque and all these, this comes much, much later. For a very long time, these were herdsmen who drank milk from goats' teats directly.
Okay, and how do you convince a Muslim of that?
Well, I mean, they're not looking to be convinced. They're not looking for the evidence when you have got somebody who's dodging in the way that Gunderson's talking about and saying, oh, I don't want to accept this part of some, Sira, and I'll accept some other parts. This isn't a person who's actually looking for you to convince them. They're going to find some other thing to get out of it. It's not. I mean, I think you'd pretty much give it up at that point.
Yes, exactly. I agree with you. But now what Gunderson did is ask an excellent question. And that is, what is the point behind all this? Why do you have this, if there is so much nonsense, so much negativity in there, and you really have to pick and choose to find something positive. So what's the point? Why do you have all this if you can prove either which way you want, anything that you want?
Yeah, so, and they'll ignore what they don't like, basically.
Exactly.
Well, they're just picking and choosing. They're just picking and choosing. I mean, and it's usually arbitrary. It's usually completely arbitrary. I mean, it's just, and this just like this kind of behavior really characterizes. I mean, like for example, going back to like all Muhammad's various misdeeds, and the kind they'll justify his massacres, they'll justify his genocides. But they don't apply these same standards for, I don't know, the USA or for other nations or for other time periods. They've got absolutely no consistency. It's just ad hoc. It's just arbitrary, whatever they can, whatever they piss out at the time to justify, their convictions.
Yeah, that's exactly what I noticed with the I was talking once about I think it was the Banu Qurayza. And then I can't remember who I was talking about this to, but it was this Muslim guy was saying something like, "Oh, they were conspiring against us." And then, when they said that, I was just instantly reminded of all the Turkish nationalists I've argued with over the years. Like say, "Oh, the Armenians were conspiring against us." It was justifiable to deport all of them, just because a few of them might have been engaging in armed rebellion. So it's just the same logic. I was instantly reminded of that when I heard that.
Yeah.
We all agree. Wow.
It's like watching somebody today trying to explain. You see this with all these religions. Have you ever heard somebody try to explain why it was logical for Moses' Jews to slaughter, the Canaanites and all, and they explain at the time there was a good reason why genocide was okay at that point. It's like you nailed it. I mean, it sounds ridiculous.
It is, and this is why you laugh about people who then, I mean, all right, I'm sorry that I'm on about this, but this is why then you find the new attitude and the new apparent way out, which is then using linguistics, because the last 30 years have been spent on science, trying to verify everything. And today they go back and they say, well, no, if we look at the linguistic side of the Quran, if we look at the linguistic side of the Hadith, then everything becomes apparent again. And then we can use the messages, the good messages in the Sirah, or all 3 or 4 levels of Islamic texts. And we can then say, well, from the linguistic point of view, it is all positive and wonderful, and we can take any good message out of there that we want.
Yeah, so I mean, Ali, what you were saying, I mean, are you saying in the past they would have just said, they wouldn't have been at all apologetic about the fact that the Israelites slaughtered a bunch of people for no good reason, but nowadays because we have all these concepts of human rights, they will try and come up with apologize for it and come up with oh, maybe there was a good reason.
Some people, right. Some people don't even apologize. They say that it was the right thing to do at the time. They are literally just ad hoc justifying genocide, and it always looks the same no matter who's doing it. It's pathetic and disgusting.
Yes. Well, I was going to say something. I can't remember
Well,
what
you know
now.
what's really irritating is when modern apologists will insist that all of these conflicts were in self-defense from A to Z, from Taif and Mecca and Medina to all the way to, you know, I mean, for somehow
No,
this
I mean,
community,
you see,
this community in the Jaws somehow
you cannot
communities from bacteria to Bactria compose they made up an existential threat to people living in
you can blow this out of the water with one phrase. أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يدخلون دين الله. It's they cannot get any clearer than that. I was ordered to go to war with people until they enter the religion of Allah. Everybody knows these. Everybody knows this saying. It is clear as day. These are not people who have done anything except for not enter the religion of Allah. It cannot get any clearer than that. And as soon as you say that, they will then have to occupy the position of saying that it is okay to fight other people for no other reason and kill them than that they don't believe in your religion.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So wait, is that a hadith or is that just like a or is that from the Quran when
That's
Muhammad
Quran.
says subjugate
It's
them
Quran.
until
Fight for the cause.
find themselves subjugated and pay the jizya?
are you sure? I think that's. Are you sure that's from the Quran itself?
It's Quran. Fight for the cause of Allah.
Well, now who's saying is wait, no, I think this is
hold on.
this is it sounds like something that like Umar would say or one of the other
No,
people.
no,
I wonder if it was even Muhammad.
No,
It
no,
was definitely
that,
Muhammad.
It was
That phrase
It's
is used a
definitely
lot in the Quran, isn't it? You know, fight for the cause of God. Isn't that phrase used?
okay.
in a number of
You know what? It
places?
has to be a hadith because if it's someone speaking in the first person, I think that even. I mean, there are several cases where Muhammad blunders and speaks as himself when he's supposed to be speaking as God. But God, I don't think that even he would say, "I, Allah, have been ordered by Allah to go to war against mankind." So it must be. It must be.
Might be. Yeah, I think that you may be correct there.
Yeah.
Let me just make sure.
It's very
I'll
very
make sure.
similar to that verse. Was it the verse of the sword? Was it?
No, that's Surah 9, verse 30. Sorry, where it says about subjugate them until they pay the tax, etc.
Yeah,
no,
and
the
find
verse of the
themselves.
sword is verse 5 of the same surah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna find that out while you guys work this out. I'll make sure to get an accurate
Here's a question.
quotation.
Do you think that Muhammad realistically had global vision for his religion? Because it seems like in the formation of his doctrine, he took some of the worst aspects of the other two major Abrahamic branches. In other words, he took the exceptionalism you see in Judaism, where they say, okay, these are a special group of people. These are God's people, and when they fight against people who are not God's people, all bets are off. Like, the campaign of the Israelites against the Canaanites, and how they can slaughter everything and be justified because they're, and then you combine that with the Christian doctrine of indefinite evangelism, and you have a very, very potent combination of doctrines, because of course Judaism, it's possible to convert to Judaism, but and even be recognized as a convert, but it's not an evangelical religion. And Christianity, well, they found a workaround for whatever supposedly peaceful basis is supposed to be at the core of Christianity, and certainly did a lot of converting by the sword and dominion by the sword. But on paper, Christianity was not supposed to be in a temporal sense a religion of conquest. It seems like the popular doctrine was that word of mouth and conviction and persistence and patience and forgiveness would convert people. And people will just see how we live our lives and be inspired by our example and so forth. But like I said, you take the most militant aspects of Judaism, the most militant and ambitious aspects of Christianity, and combine them together when in the formation of Islam, and you have a religion that intends from day one, it seems, to spread like wildfire one way or another. But I wonder, having said that, do you think that Muhammad really had global ambitions for his religion?
If you talk to Muslims, they think they do. I mean, if you
No,
talk to
I
Muslims,
think
if you talk to
it was
Muslims,
justification. I think that what he wanted was justification for his deeds, and this is why he built in this right of way for Muslims, saying that Muslims are better people than everybody else. I don't think he envisaged really a global reach for everything.
well, I mean, they certainly point to places where you know, Allah's religion will be everywhere, and you know, they have all these different, you know, it really, like I said, it really depends. You can't, I mean, can you really find out what Muhammad's intentions were at that point? I don't think that that's actually possible, to be honest.
No, I mean, and also the thing is, like even if he did want to like be all over the world, I mean, we have to consider what he thought was the world at the time, which was probably far smaller than what it actually is.
By the way, guys, I want to just make sure that I correct this. It is not the Quran. It is a hadith that's it's a hadith sahih, and it's one that everybody agrees on, muttafaq alayh, and it's the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab.
So Abdul ibn Umar.
عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما. I don't know Khalid ibn Sa'd. Nope, I don't know which son. It doesn't actually say here. But that is in fact a hadith. But it is one that nobody disagrees with. And so nobody's actually come out and said, obviously we're talking about Sunnis here. And so, you know, I guess I should qualify that by saying that I'm usually talking to Sunnis when I do these types of shut 'em down arguments where, you know, you cannot say that that's self-defense. It's just not. You cannot get there from that hadith.
So what does it say?
Well, it says exactly what I just said. Is أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يدخلون في دين الله. حتى يشهدوا. Hold on, let me get the actual Arabic wording. حتى يشهدوا أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله ويقيموا الصلاة ويؤتوا الزكاة. Okay, so basically it says here, I was ordered to fight all people until they declare there's no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet, and pray and pay zakah. And if they do that, then they save their blood, their money from me. And so basically it says that I will kill anybody who does not say La ilaha illallah or Muhammadan Rasulullah. I will kill them and take their money, is actually pretty much what it says there.
Well, I mean, in practice they had.
What's that?
In practice, they didn't go that far, though. I mean, they gave the three conditions or choices to each of the cities that they laid siege to. It's you can either.
So this is largely credited to the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, when you read this in context, this is about the Arabian Peninsula. He wants to get all the kuffar out of the Arabian Peninsula at this point, and that's when he says this particular hadith. And so he doesn't do that, and as a matter of fact, he doesn't actually do that with all the tribes in the Arabian Peninsula either. But that is what is attributed to him, and if you are a Sunni, you have to take this as true.
Yeah, but anyway, in practice, of course, even relatively hardline rulers and generals and governors softened their approach. You know, and when I say softened, I mean that instead of complete annihilation, they had, for each major city, they would say, okay, well, you have three choices. You can either all convert to Islam, you can become a protected group of people and pay us the land and poll tax, or you can all die. So there were choices. They weren't good choices, but there were choices. And really, some of the early rulers, it seems like they preferred to have a high ratio of non-Muslims because of the tax burden. And I looked into this at length, and there was one point that they had a sort of several periods actually that they had financial crises brought about by excessive conversions to Islam by people who, whether they were sincere or whether they were doing it for the tax break, they got a tax break. They could get out of paying the poll and land tax until they had to reverse this policy in many cases and say, okay, if you convert, if at first your city's conquered and you're in our territory and you convert to Islam, you get out of the poll tax, but not the kharaj, the land tax. So because if too many people in the conquered territories converted too fast to these to Islam and got out of both of those taxes, it created a huge crunch. I forget the exact numbers, but I have them in a reference. It's staggering how much revenue they lost when people really started coming to the religion in droves. It reminds me a lot of Christopher Columbus. There's a story about him that he didn't want to take any priests with him to the New World because he didn't want to convert the natives to Christianity, because under Spanish Catholicism, you weren't allowed to enslave a fellow Christian, but you could enslave anyone else. So the last thing that he wanted was to convert the natives to Christianity, because otherwise he would have had a smaller pool of slaves. And there was the similar mentality during the Umayyad and much of the Abbasid period, in that I think enjoyed the position of superiority and wealth that they got relative to this peasant class of largely disenfranchised conquered peoples, rather than, and they enjoyed having that more than they relished the thought of suddenly having more brothers and sisters in Islam.
Yeah, it's in both Bukhari and Muslim, by the way, Kling.
And,
Oh, really? Really?
And it's by Muhammad.
Bab al-Iman in Bukhari. I just sent it to you in the chat too. The actual, it is Abdullah ibn Umar, by the way.
Oh, sweet.
It's in Bab al-Iman, or it's called, I think faith is the section that it's in.
All right, well, thanks for joining the show, Gunderson, and we're going to let you go. Come back anytime. Salam. All right, so should we wrap it up?
I think so.
Well,
if you guys want to keep going, that's fine. But I have to go find Easter eggs now.
No, I think we've gone. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope this was edifying. I will think of something good for 2 weeks from now. We haven't decided on anything yet. Thank you, Ali, for standing in today. We were a few guests short. Stopspamming and Klingschor, of course. Thank you as always. And you want to plug your Arab Atheist Broadcasting?
And also have a word after that.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we do an Arabic show also discussing atheism and pretty much discussing Islam, and we do bump into Christianity and other stuff in Arabic, and we are it's kind of this the same kind of show, and it's Friday before this show every 2 weeks. We're actually thinking about expanding, and you can find us on the web at www.arabatheistbroadcasting.com or .org, and we're also on YouTube and Blog TV under the same name, on Twitter at Arab Atheist TV, and I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for letting me plug it in.
All the links will be below when this is uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah, Klingschor and then Stopspamming. Final comments before we sign off.
I just wanted to quickly say that if anyone anyone amongst the viewers is actually interested in getting involved with the Gin and Tonic show, with helping us out with admin stuff or with promotion and so forth, or you just want to get involved in some way, just feel free to contact us. Probably via Facebook would be the best way. All the links to our Facebook will be below as well when this is uploaded to YouTube. Because, yeah, I mean, We want to, I think, I don't know about the other guys, but I like the idea of expanding the show and reorganizing and becoming more professional and extending our outreach. So if anyone wants to get involved, yeah, feel free to contact us.
In addition to that, we are looking for more panelists. Obviously, a lot of fan favorites in terms of panelists have come and gone for various reasons. Some people can't attend regularly. There's no strict resume that you would need in order to be on the panel, but however, that expertise in Islamic history, lore, and doctrine are preferred, and of course, ex-Muslims are welcome. Not welcome. I mean, they're needed. They're needed. So if anyone has interest in that, or if you're active on a forum with a lot of ex-Muslims or people who are interested in studying Islam, put the word out. We're looking for more people, so we have a steady supply of panelists in case people are unable to attend for one reason or the other. Obviously, Godless Saudi and Frank, who were normally wonderful contributors, they were unable to attend today. So let's do that legwork and get some fresh blood in here. And stop spamming. Final word before we go.
Good night. No, I want to apologize to everybody about the confusion that we had with the starting time. This is our fault. We did not discuss this. I did not research this properly. We've now done our homework, and the next show will be on time.
Yes, from now on, it'll be at 9 British Standard. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. I was going by GMT. Stop was going. I think I explained this before. As a matter of fact, I might cut this part out as well, just because it'll all get sorted out. It's basically back at the time that you used to be used to. Okay. So, thank you, everyone, and a special thanks, as always, to Tony Slutface, who half the time I forgot to thank him for his contribution. We could not do the show without him. Except from now on, we probably will do the show without him, because I'm finally stopped being lazy and learned how to use the streaming and recording software myself, so that we don't have to bother him anymore. But thank you, Tony, for all the shows that have been uploaded, only due to your perseverance and hard work. And we'll see you guys all in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Salam.